Every year, millions of Canadians struggle with substance abuse. Addiction does not discriminate. It doesn't matter if you're street involved, studying law, in high school, or what your race, gender, political views, or religion may be. Of those millions, only a small fraction ever break free. We call them the 2%. These are the people far enough into recovery to reach back and help someone else. I'm Stephanie, and alongside me, my friend and co-host Margie, who has proudly fought for her own recovery. We'll introduce you to people who have fought hard to reclaim their lives. From their hard-learned lessons, we hope you'll find wisdom you can apply to your own journey. We'll also share the 12-Step Recovery Program, a cornerstone of healing for countless recovering addicts since 1935. We want to encourage you to keep an open mind. Notice how these stories might impact you. And join us as we challenge the stigma surrounding addiction. Welcome to the 2% Podcast. We're really glad you're here. Welcome to the 2% Video Podcast.
Yes.
We are back with another guest. Welcome.
Thank you.
So how did you feel when we asked you to be on the podcast? What was kind of going through your mind?
Probably more like excited and nervous. I always like the opportunity to share like where I started and where I've come from. But I think now it's just like more excitement to share, a little bit nervous just because you don't know what's coming, but super excited.
That's awesome. Yeah. And Margie, thank you for the connection. Yes. And how are you feeling over there?
Oh, I love this. I love this. And I love Rachel. Like, you know, when we decided to do this first season on steps and I was thinking about people, it was like really easy for me to come up with people. I was telling that to Rachel, like I've listened to her story a few times and like I just know 6 and 7 is her, and
My favorite,
like they are her favorite steps. And I don't think she's ever said those words, but a lot of her shares revolve around different character defects and shortcomings that she's overcome and where she was and where she's now. And she's got an insane story. So I'm really excited for people to be able to hear that out there because, you know, people who are going to be watching this need to hear those types of things, right? Like it's possible for anybody, right? So.
Well, I know that you were telling me that you just spent, what was it? Did you say a month with your niece and nephews?
Yes, a month with them. I think in total it ended up being 9 kids in different shifts. And then my sister's kids stayed the whole 30 days. So they're still at home. So
Did you start a soccer team while they were
We got really good at basketball. We almost had a whole team going. Every time we went to Muskogee, there was a bunch of us, all different skill levels, but we did all right.
Just out of curiosity, looking back to where you were to where you are, the fact that you can have your nieces and nephews with you, like what does that do for you?
I actually, for the first time in my life, I've never had my own place. I've never had a really safe place to bring them in and have them. And then 5 years ago, I was able to get into my own home and I've stayed in that home and I've always had a spare room for them. So having them come and spend time with me is honestly like a dream come true. They're my favorite people. And, you know, my niece is the one that inspired me to change my life. You know, she told me she wanted to be just like me when she was 12. And at that point, I was deep in addiction and I hated myself and I wanted her to be nothing like me. So it inspired me to change my life because I had these little feet following me and I didn't want to disappoint them. I wanted to give them somebody to look up to.
Oh, and you got to tell her about the fridge and the one thing that you always wanted in your life, because
I always wanted my own fridge to put those little school photos and the wedding announcements and the birth announcements, but I didn't really have any ties with anyone or friends that I was being invited to these things. You know, I was deep in addiction, and then, you know, I have a fridge now that is like full to the brim of all those pictures and wedding announcements and birth announcements. So it's really changed my life and it put me into like something that was normal for most people, but it just never seemed attainable that was something that I could have. So it was a dream for a long time to have my own refrigerator in my home to put my school pictures on. So,
but that's something that like you don't think of in active addiction. It's not something like a fridge,
Right.
because that's connection and memories and people that love you and people
Right.
that you love. And
This legacy. I always thought, I'm like, I have no legacy to leave behind. I have nothing that I've taught anyone, nothing I've done great in my life. Coming into a more normal life, I call it the vanilla life, and it's a beautiful life. There's nothing wrong with vanilla. It's a good, normal, stable flavor of life, and that's what I wanted. Stability in my life. I wanted normal. I wanted a safe, happy home to bring my family.
But it's a testament to, like, when we first get clean, the things that we aspire for are just pictures on a fridge. And then a year later, you have that own home, not just the fridge. Like, you have a place, you have your family, you have all of these things. And like, where you end up is just so much further along than
You could
a picture on a fridge.
Yeah. Like decorating for the holidays, hosting Mother's Day brunch. Like, these are things that I could never afford, and these were things that I could never do. So having those moments now where I get to, kind of show my gratitude and serve my family in a different way. They spent years worrying about me. I was an addict since I was 15, 16 years old, and I got clean when I was 30. So the most of my life I was struggling. My life is just combusting inside out. So
wow.
It's time to change.
Well, I was going to say, like, I mean, it's been 6 years, but like, I would never, ever have guessed,
And,
right?
I was always outgoing and bubbly, and, at times I was keeping a job and I was fooling everybody, and, maybe just, using drugs and alcohol as more of a crutch to kind of try to be normal, not realizing that it was actually pushing me farther away. So all those fake good feelings and that serotonin and all that, it was just, a facade, right? I wasn't happy. I wasn't happy with who I was. I wasn't happy with how I showed up with my family, or even that I used and sometimes spent time with them. Like, that was a big guilt and shame because, they are my favorite people, and I was showing them the worst version of myself.
Okay, let's talk about steps. We're big on the steps, Margie.
We are big on the steps. In any recovery program that you choose when you decide to clean up, steps is the meat and potatoes of every program that you could choose from.
It's about getting right with the world. Like 1, 2, and 3 is getting right with a higher power or a God of your understanding. 4, 5, 6 is about getting right with yourself. 7, 8, 9 is about getting right with your family. And 10, 11, 12 is getting right with the world. So, they are like the foundation that you build to teach yourself how to be a good person. So if you were lacking that, growing up, the emotional regulation, the how to treat others, morals and values, and all those things, is I didn't have those great role models. So I acted the same as the people that were teaching me, or the adults in my life. So I didn't really have anybody to look up to in a role model. So then I really used that as like in a higher power, is like, how would I want to behave for the kids? How would I want them to look at me? And, the respect and the honesty and, just being a good person, being kind, being thoughtful, being compassionate. These are the things that I wanted to show others. So, I really dived in. 6
and 7 are my favorite as well. In my opinion, 6 and 7 is actually where the life-changing steps. A lot of people focus on the 4. But that's all the stuff that's already happened here in your life, right? 6 and 7 is like, this is who I am. Like, grossly looking in a mirror, this is who I am when I'm not okay, right? And how do I change these things, the character defects, right? So I'm entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. Like, for you, I think I just want to know, like, how did you become entirely ready?
I think that after you do the previous steps and I was completely honest with who I was and the things that I did and the things that I was most unhappy with, I was carrying those around for years. And, when I was able to just put it out and put it on paper, that, I became entirely ready, is because I didn't want to be that person anymore. And I had this opportunity in my life to change those. And, not to take that chance and take that moment for myself. I was sick of carrying all these bad things about myself in my head. I was ready to be free. I was ready to show the world this new me. And, you know, I became open and honest about where I was because, you know, I truly believed that I was someone loved at this point in my recovery. And, you know, I just wanted to take in as much as I could. And that meant being honest with who I was, even the yucky parts.
Well, and everybody has yucky parts, right?
Yes.
Like, I think we learned that too, like, we're human.
Right, and I'm not so unique, right?
No.
The thoughts, the feelings of being human and the excitement and the happiness, those are things we all share, and that's what connects us.
Exactly, so.
I love this. I love this so much. And I have to say, I love this because, like, I think that each and every one of us could benefit from recovery, like whether you struggle with, you know, like capital A addiction or, you know.
And I truly believe that everybody should have this opportunity to take it. It's like this handbook you get about yourself. And when I first opened it and started to do them, like all the questions were perfect. And they asked me the questions that I already knew the answer to. I just wasn't ready to admit. So then once you get going through them, you realize like, wow, this has really changed my life. And I couldn't imagine if the world all sat down and did the set of steps, how great and amazing and connected we would all be.
Yeah. They should have like a human anonymous.
Right.
Yeah.
How to human.
Right? How to human.
Yeah, how to human.
I am still a huge advocate for the fact that like, junior highs and high schools, this should be part of the curriculum, even if it's just in their career and life management. I think a set of steps altered with maybe the word addictions and things taken out of it, but the work itself, the basis of it all should be part of that because they just don't know how to, like I personally was never taught well to manage my emotions. Like I grew up in a household where rub some dirt on it, push it under a rug, don't cry and keep going. Nobody needs to know, you'll be fine. Right? So like this, like steps just open that.
Right. That it was okay to feel and be human. Yeah. And that there wasn't like this lifetime sentence for making mistakes. And that's why I held myself on this pedestal that I wanted to be better than my parents and better than the people that came before me and the people that raised me, that anytime that I faltered or made a mistake, that I would hold myself to the highest accord. Like, and then I would punish myself for other people's bad behavior and myself. And it slowly depleted who I was because I grew up as I don't give, you know, any cares about anything else in the world. I was confident. I was myself. I was friends with everybody. And slowly that depleted the more and more that I started to look at myself as failing. And I think like every human theory is that we all want to succeed and do good. We all want to leave the world with something better. But how do we do it?
Join recovery.
Well, and everybody has some form of addiction, whether like these days phones, like scrolling, tablets. Like these are the things that recovery is for. So like it's what am I avoiding kind of thing, right? So like just what was your overall experience with your first step 6 and 7? Because I'm assuming you've done a few.
Yes. I've done a few, and I've done some with different people in recovery. Yeah. My first version of step 6 is, after hiding all of my mistakes that I've ever made in my life, to write a list of my defects and to look at them and be honest about that, because I always pretended I was better than I was. I grew up the same as you. So, we didn't talk about the things that happened at home. There was you had to go out and represent your family, and you definitely weren't going to put a bad name to them. So after that and thinking of that, it was very humbling. It was very soul opening, as I would say, to realize that as much defects that I have, that I also have assets that I bring to the world. So focusing on those defects taught me where I needed to start from to change. And, not necessarily every defect is harmful. Nope. But the way I was using them became harmful. Yeah.
And the spiritual principles that come along with like I'm a really judgmental person is one of mine. How do you become non-judgmental? And like the more you write about it, all of a sudden those judgmental thoughts pop in your head and you're like, oh, ew. know.
For me, I have a control aspect. Trying to make things go the way that I wanted them to.
Yeah, me too.
Allowed me not to feel like I was falling apart or going to different functions. Because even in my recovery journey, I've had to repair my relationship with my family. And even though I had a rough childhood, the people that my parents are today are actually really great people. And I had to learn how to forgive them. So I was very unforgiving. Yeah. That was a defect. I wanted to punish them as much as what their actions did to hurt me. I wanted them to take some sort of accountability. But what you realize is that you're not going to get what you want from those people, and that you're still going to have to move forward in life. So I had to repair my relationship with my family over these years because I didn't want to be with them and I didn't want to be around them. And family functions were really traumatic for me. I didn't want to go. Even though it was okay, I wasn't okay. Yeah. So taking those different things and learning how to forgive them, that my mom is living her life for the first time ever. And, that she has made mistakes and that she's not happy with everything that she's done. But the person she is today is a person that's worth forgiving. It teaches you, your life really goes back to those steps in 6 and 7. I'm not casting people away, or I believe in second chances. I believe that there is no such thing as a lost cause. Right. But there's work to be done.
Yep.
Where did you find her? Goodness gravy. Yeah, dang.
If you want to find some of the best people on this planet, come to a recovery meeting.
It's true. It's true.
People who are in there have gone through hell and back, and they just have an empathy matched by nobody else. Absolutely. They understand where you're at any given moment, whether you're just walking in and broken, or you're 6 years in and struggling, or you get some bad news and you're trying to go through that. People have gone through, and I know Rachel herself has gone through some things in her recovery, where a lot of us, when we first walk in, would be like, this is an excuse for me to use. If this ever happens to me, I'm out. And I've watched Rachel go through a lot of those things and just keep doing her recovery. She learned the tools to keep going and not give up just because some rock got jammed in the wheel of life. Right. So
I used to think that I was a monster because I have such bad radical acceptance, and that could be considered a defect of character, but also an asset. When you go through my job, I work with the unhoused population, through recovery, through other support meetings and therapy, is what you learn is that life is just not a cookie cutter life, that real things happen and that we're not excused from the highs and the lows of life. So that I had to ride the highs as much as the lows because it was just all part of that journey. So when I do lose people, or, people pass away, or things that happen, there's an acceptance that we are going to lose some people. And it's so unfortunate. And you want to change that narrative, but it is a part of life and it is hard. And I'm only starting over again, that I'm not excused for the next thing that comes. So, at least I'm better equipped to handle it now, and better equipped to help others around me handle those. So, the radical acceptance part, I thought, I'm like, oh my God, I'm cold. I've turned cold. I'm not loving. But, just accepting that, there's sometimes that people do pass away in your programs or in your life, and it is tragic and it is sad, and those are someone loved out there. You can look at them at the street and judge them and judge those type of people, but that was a little boy or a little girl that somebody had big dreams for, and that they probably had big dreams for themselves, and somewhere along the line they got lost. And the more that we speak out about addiction and different vices that people are using, and talking about that, it's affected your life and it's not okay right now, but there's an opportunity to change that. And, you can start being someone different as long as that's what's true to yourself, right?
Share a little bit about how it all started for you.
I'm born to teen parents. So my parents had 4 kids by the time they were 21. They started having kids at 15. My parents were very young and trying to find their own way as well. So they were, participating in more partying. We grew up in the 90s. So that was a different time, and we grew up in a small town, and I think everybody's parents were socially drinking at that time. But what I didn't realize is that whereas maybe it was social for them, it was more of an everyday reality for me. So I grew up never wanting to drink. I never wanted to act the way they did. I never wanted to talk the way they did. And I wanted to show up as a different person growing up. So I think that, staying away from alcohol, of course, then it brought other vices into my life. And, I thought it was better. I thought it was different. I thought maybe I would have more control. And what I realized is before I even knew it, I couldn't stop. I couldn't stop on my own. And even though it was hurting my life, my addiction became my most abusive relationship. I loved it and it hurt me, and I loved it and it isolated me, and I loved it and it took me away from the things that made me happy. And, each morning I'd wake up and say never again. But by that night, it was like something was in me that I couldn't control it. And all I craved was for something to pick me up out of my life for 5 minutes and put me somewhere else. And that's what addiction basically was doing to me. And then realizing that I could be okay just as I am and who I am, and that I didn't need those other things to feel better. Like the first time that I picked up, it lit something up in my brain, and it made me feel different. And I was just craving different and not realizing that I could have had it in a different way.
And I think that will resound with a lot of people, Yeah, I mean, for me, I never struggled with hard drugs or alcohol, but I picked up a smoking addiction at 14. And that became my coping mechanism for years and years and years. A moment of difficulty outside for a fresh air break, and very acceptable. But yeah, it's just something that you lean on. And when life gets hard, you turn to that thing. And before you know it, your brain is full of these neural pathways that all go to your thing. Yeah.
It's your coping mechanism.
Yes, the coping mechanisms. And, you can use them for good or bad. And that's kind of what step 6 and 7 is like for me. It shows me the good and the bad, that it allows me to accept things as they are, that the world is mixed up with all types of life and all types of differences. And it opened me up to want to not only change my life, like it gave me a desire to change my life, but it also gave me a desire to change the world around me. So
that's amazing. And guess what? You are.
You're right. And it's such a beautiful place to be. And, and the biggest thing that I'm doing is just being me. And that just ripples, throughout the community, throughout my family, through these kids that I'm leading, that I'm teaching. The goal is to raise good humans. And, I know that I'm having a part in that instead of a part of allowing them to realize that the world isn't as great as you thought it would be. Because I couldn't imagine taking myself away from them again because of the way their little hearts have loved me, even when I was at the worst part of my life. It gave me that courage to be more me.
I'm going to poke and prod a little bit because I think that, I just think that the biggest message of hope in Rachel's life is just kind of letting us know how the last 2 years of her life has been, because it's been crazy.
Yes. Yes. I have had a whirlwind. I think that there gets to be a point in your life that once you started dealing with one thing and that you start to overcome it, that you're craving more in your life. And that's how it was with my addiction. Before, it was like more staying out late, more sneaking around, more tragedy and tragic happenings. But it was adrenaline almost, but I was always searching for more. And then I got that itch for more, and life, at that time, it was like not believing in myself that I could be more or do more, that I wasn't stuck where I was just as I was. And, I ended up going back to school to work in community support because I wanted to change the world, and I knew it started at the bottom. And then I was able to work in an unhoused, kind of home, which taught people how to be independent living and to teach them how to be successful members of society, how it looked for them, right? Not how it looks for society in general. But over the last 2 years, life didn't, it started to show me the terrible parts of life again. And that those choices that other people have were affecting my life. And, you know, as much as I love the people in my family, you know, there has been a person in their life that hurt them. And that was really hard to overcome, because the goal of mine was to try to protect them from the hard parts of life and the people that want to do badly and have used them as scapegoats to treat that way. And it broke my heart. And then I had a friend who was family, and her daughter had a baby, and unfortunately she passed away from unknown causes at 3 weeks old in a really tragic way. And it made me stop looking at the world as good again. It's made me start focusing on what was wrong with the world and what things still needed to be fixed, and that people weren't changing. And it just made me realize that I'm just such a small drop that I wasn't sure that I could change anything after that. You know, it took away my happiness and my hope that, you know, maybe we could evolve into a world where there was more good than evil. You know, I stopped going to meetings as much. I stopped wanting to work on myself. And then I got that itch of more. And that's when I realized that I did, you know, that I had opportunity to create more for myself. And that was with going back to school. I really had to humble myself, because the last time I wrote an essay, it was pencil on a loose leaf paper, and it was in 2006.
And this is coming from the girl with the Hotmail account.
Right? That I get roasted by these Gen Zs and younger.
Yeah.
Apparently having a Hotmail account is like an ageist thing. So,
It dates you. LimeWire, anyone?
Yeah, okay, I'm older than both of you.
so I think that after like going through that and, you know, realizing that I wasn't able to protect the people that I loved the most from people that didn't love them the way that they should have, you know, it gave me even more of that desire again. It was almost like a rock bottom in the middle of recovery. And even though my life wasn't unmanageable, the life around me was unmanageable. And, you know, that was really hard, because I had such a safe spot around me. You go to meetings and it's safe, and I'm home and I'm safe, and I've been at the job that I was at for 5 years. So everything was safe, and it just shook my world out from underneath me. And, you know, as much as it hurt me and it was hard, and that we're still dealing with the after effects of those moments in my life, that it makes me want to work harder in showing them how to be emotional and showing them how to grieve and how to process those things, and then teaching them how to use that instead of feeling powerless, and turning it into a way that they can help others or help themselves to, you know, to recover from those things, because we're not free from those things happening to us. We're not free from evil of the world. I can't protect them from everyone as much as I would want to give them that unconditional love and that unconditional support, that I'm not going to be able to be there to protect them from that all the time. But teaching them how to be a good person, and teaching them that it's okay to not be okay, and that it's okay to ask for help. Asking for help is the most freeing thing. And I didn't realize it until I did step one, that when I asked for help about my unmanageable life, that it opened doors for me that I never thought would happen. And next thing you know, I'm on this path of recovery. And then I became this Oprah Winfrey of recovery. And I would leave meetings with my friends in the vehicles, and I'd be like, you can recover and you can recover. And they would be like, shut up, Rachel. And I just wanted to give it to everybody. Yeah. And by being that is I had to, you know, I had to show them too that I'm not okay all the time, but my life is filled with good and bad. And I have good every day in my life. And before it was just bad. So I have this uncontrollable gratitude of life and for things and for moments, you know, listening to the kids giggle in the bedroom and playing board games and, you know, just the little moments of life. There's so many like spiritual awakenings, even if you have a problem or distrust in a God or a higher power, you know, these moments happen that make you realize that you're exactly where you're supposed to be. And this is, you know, these things have happened to you, but I have the choice of how I'm going to use it. And I have the choice of how I'm going to use that awful thing and change it into a moment where I can show people that, again, that it's not a lifetime sentence and that you don't have to punish yourself for somebody else's wrongdoing, and you can forgive yourself, because sometimes people are just victims of other people, and sometimes you're a victim of your own mentality. But, you know, that life is okay, and it can be okay, and that there's so many things that can help you get there.
So, question, have you considered writing a book?
I haven't.
Right in her face, like,
I haven't. I think that
fans would like to know.
I have this, I don't know what it turned into, because when I came into meetings, I couldn't even look up from the ground. I was so full of guilt and shame and hate for myself. And I hated everybody there, but I thought I was better than them. And I learned that we were the same, that I may not have done the same things or done that, but, you know, the anger I felt, the pain I felt, the happiness, the life-shattering moments where I thought that I wouldn't be able to pick myself up again, all those moments have made me who I am. And the person I am today is the best version of myself. And it wasn't because life went right. It was because that even at my worst moment that I picked myself up off the ground and I kept going. And I was able to have this incredible life today. And that's by believing in who I was and believing in a program and believing that, you know, I could be more. I could be more. And why start tomorrow when I can start today?
You're beaming. What do you have to say?
Because I'm like, you sit here and you listen to Rachel and how she is, and like how you look at her and you're like, I couldn't even imagine you like that. And as she was talking, the story of how she got to her first few meetings.
Yes. So my story is not a perfect one. I did not come on my own free will to meetings, but these people I was hanging out with before, I had the opportunity or the moment, and I took her car and I kept it for a while. So I came to meetings in a stolen car for probably 3 months, allegedly. I have no charges. But that's what the rumor is, that I was driving in a stolen car. And I didn't come in as happy and smiley before. You know, my face was white and thin. I had a hole through my lip. I almost lost my top lip just because of my drug use. And, you know, I didn't look like myself and I didn't feel like myself. And when I look at those pictures, it feels like they're two different people. And that, you know, that even though I look at it and it looks like me, that these people are entirely different. And even though that I could look at that person and hate her and look at her and, you know, all those things that I did, and I could beat myself up and hold those things against me. But again, I was band-aiding a bullet hole that I didn't know how to cope with, and I didn't know how to be better, and I didn't know how to ask for help because I was still thinking that mentality is you need to lie about what's happening at home. So I was pre-programmed to lie and make myself look better no matter where I was in life, no matter how hard I was struggling, no matter how much I needed just a hand up. I just needed somebody to reach in and pull me up. So I did come in a mess. First 6 months, I said, I hate this. I'm leaving. I'm going out. I'm not doing this. Like, you know, the amount of members that saved me in the parking lot, we'll say, was numerous. But I'm grateful for every single one of them because they taught me that, you know, by using these skills and by diving in and getting help for my mental health treatment, because I don't have an addiction problem per se. I have a Rachel problem, and that addiction formed because I didn't know how to cope with being myself.
I'm not going to drop it.
Nope. We're running short on mics. We won't drop it.
Next thing you know, we'll
One.
And that is the moment. I can't get down without crushing it.
What were you saying? The mic dropped unintentionally. And what were we talking about?
I think I was talking about I had a problem being myself. So I didn't know how to cope with me sitting by yourself, like how uncomfortable that is to sit with yourself and hate yourself. And I've had mentors and other people in my life that told me that when I was in these moments and hanging out with myself, that I was basically hanging out with the sociopath that only wanted bad and would tell me to do these things and act on emotions and self-sabotage, because I'd be like, yes, I was addicted to adrenaline. I wanted to fight with everybody when I first got into the program. So like my friend would be like, I love elephants. I'd be like, your elephants suck. And it was just to fight back and forth. And it was just something to feel something. Again, I just wanted to feel something instead of this muted person that I was on the inside, but I was just scared to show everybody else.
I love this process, and I love Rachel. I laughed because she just took 6 years not long ago. And I shared there too. Like, I remember when I first came into recovery, and probably like when you did, I was all angry and bitter and judgmental. And like Rachel would talk and it'd be like, oh, Miss Positivity over here. She just talks so well, and it just flows. So like, and same thing, right? Like, it's, you have something that I don't have. I don't have the confidence to speak like you do. And, you know, and it drives us for a little while until something just clicks and changes. And because, you know, you've put in the work, and then all of a sudden you have a message to share. And it's like, oh, well, maybe it's because she's got 4 years on me that she has something better to say than me. Like, maybe she knows a little bit more than me. And, you know, and then,
humbling.
Yeah, you know, and then it was like, you know, Rachel's going to share it, and I would be waiting to hear what you had to say, right? And it's great to see the progression in that with people. So I think everybody can relate to when you first come in and how you feel about people, and you feel different about the people that are kind of there for long periods of time. They're like the grandpappy, grandmas, and you're like, ooh, like, and then there's the ones that just have a few years, and then you're just like,
Right? You don't know it yet.
You don't know. You don't even know what it was like. Look at you. You look perfect. Right? Like, you have such a good life. You have no idea the things I've suffered.
Exactly. Like, what were you addicted to? Your like, soft drugs?
Yeah. Right? You form all of these judgments in your head because you don't look like an addict.
Right.
And when you come in, you look like not okay. Like, you look skinny and, you know, I want to say malnourished. That's the word that comes to my head. And like pale, kind of just gross skin and hair, and, you know, and you feel inside worse than you even look on the outside.
There's almost like there's no brightness in the people that you meet in the beginning, and they're awkward and they're not social. And so it makes it like hard to connect sometimes with these people, because again, we're thinking that we know a little bit more than they do. And
I'm terminally
they know
unique.
A little bit less. Right.
I am terminally unique.
Well, you kind of are.
Yeah. No, I am definitely not. Not in the ways that matter in recovery and in addiction, right? And you do kind of come in like, pff, what'd you ever do?
Right?
You're this tiny little thing.
Your feet don't even hit the bottom. Or your feet, they're not even touching.
You don't know what hell is like.
And I got that. It was actually, we did a Christmas marathon meeting, and somebody in their first year asked me, they're like, what were you even addicted to? And kind of like judged me for more having my life together. And I just laughed, because there was a moment that I did that. But what I think that I didn't realize is that, you kind of look different. And after so many years or working on yourself, that, you know, it shows on the outside. Like, the inside matches the outside now. Yeah. So it started with feeling good on the inside and learning how to be me, and learning that it was okay to not be a perfect version of myself, because I was also addicted to perfectionism, right? Yeah. And when somebody told me that it's not attainable, that there's no such thing as a perfect person, and realizing that I was free to learn and make mistakes and take risks, and that I didn't have to be so muted. Rigid, yeah. And that I didn't know all the answers. That was really hard, because I know everything, and I'm really good at life. Don't mistake all that self-sabotage before. I'm really good at life. Turns out I'm not so great, and I have a lot to learn, and I'm continuing learning, and that there's just like no straight path to it. Like, the thing is I can choose to pick up. I can choose to go back. I can do all those things, but I also have a choice not to. And I think letting myself know that the ball is in my court and that I have this opportunity to choose how my life is. Nobody's choosing for me. I'm not a child growing up in addiction anymore. I'm not a little kid that can't speak up for myself. That I have this opportunity and a platform to just be and to choose, right?
I feel like that kind of feeds like control defect, but in a good way. It's like, I actually have control over my life today. I don't have to control everybody in it and the outcomes and the situations in my life, but I do have control over my life.
And how freeing that is, not being responsible for other people, like responsible for somebody else's bad behavior. So, you know, growing up in a household where things were like eggshells and tight and not welcoming, I should say, that I was also being the one that had the strongest personality in my family, is I felt I needed to protect my siblings from those things as well. And then it turned into manifesting and protecting their children from those things. And what I realized is I can't save them from bad. I can't save them from the world, but I can be there for them and just showing up and just listening to them and, you know, just knowing that they have safe people where they don't need to be perfect and that they can fall apart and that I'm going to love you unconditionally, just as their little hearts loved me.
Yeah, hey. See, from codependency to leading.
Right. And that it is. And codependency, like, I couldn't spend a second alone with myself. I didn't like who I was. I didn't like the things that I thought. And I almost crave that. You know, they say, like, serene and clean. Like, I'm really at the serenity part. And that came about 6 months in, like, from the anger and the judgment and all that. And I think that's shortly when that individual passed away that I wanted to change my life. But I went on a camping trip. And I've never been camping without substances. You know, that's how I always enjoyed myself. It was normal to crack open a beverage early in the morning and carry that out through the day. And I went on a camping trip with a friend, and it was 6 a.m. and the entire campsite was asleep. And it was just me, and I was sitting on a picnic table and the birds were chirping. And if you've experienced, like, I would say, like, benders or long-term use of substances, when those birds start chirping is a reminder that you messed up. And so you become angry with the birds as if they were the reason that your life is unmanageable. Yes. You hate those birds. And for that moment, you know, I listened to them and it occurred to me that I no longer hated the birds. And it was because I no longer hated myself and that I could sit with myself in that moment and that I didn't need to project it onto other things, that I was just being. And, you know, going back to those hard moments in my life and I stopped seeing the world as good, I thought that I wouldn't need a program anymore. I didn't want to hear the positivity. I didn't want to share positivity to people because I was hurting. And my old coping mechanisms were to run away or to hide or to change my life and change the people who I was around and, you know, recreate myself. That was my brand. And you know, I could just go and be somebody else with a new group of people. And I had to sit through that. And I ended up going to a recovery convention in Calgary. And at this time, I still didn't know if I was here. And I, you know, as much as I go back and forth on a God of my understanding and a higher power, you know, I asked and I said, like, you know, what is my purpose? Doesn't matter if I show up anymore. Doesn't matter if I keep coming to these meetings. Like, is it changing anything? Is it growing anything? Is it all of those? And, you know, I felt that I could just go and live my life without working a program this far in as well, even though I was hurting emotionally. And we ended up leaving and going to a thrift store. And there was a lady pushing 2 children. And, you know, she was watching us and we had the swag and merch and we're walking around and looking and she calls me over and I'm like, okay, like, big city, I'm a small town girl. Some lady's calling me over. Might have to square up. Or we're just going to see what's going to happen. And she called me over and she was talking about her life. And she had 2 little boys in a double stroller. And she talked about asking me where meetings were. And I told her I wasn't from this region, but where to look, because you can look online and find meetings in every town or city or anything. Like, you can find somebody that has, you know, that support that you're needing, especially with addiction. And she talked about how she lost her sister recently and how she resorted back to drinking alcohol again, and how her sister would be very sad to hear that and how upsetting that was. And she told me she lost her fiance, that he passed away shortly before that. And as she was handing a snack to one of the kids in there, and they looked like they were maybe 3 or 2, I just said, I'm like, oh, and he handed it to the younger boy. I said, oh, like, what a nice big brother you are. And she's like, actually, he was my sister's son, and I'm taking care of him. And she's like, my sister would be so sad to see me where I am and hurting. And, you know, we talked, and I gave her the information about meetings, and, you know, I hope that I helped her, you know, maybe navigate the next steps or gave her encouragement to do that. And at the end of it, she asked me what my name was. And so I said my name was Rachel, and her sister's name was Rachel. And that was such a spiritual moment for me, because it told me that it matters that I keep showing up in my personal life, but it also matters that I keep showing up in my recovery life, that I do have a purpose, and it may not be changing, you know, rooms full of people, but it's changing one person at a time. So, you know, I've never talked to her again. That was the first and only time that we talked, but that was that moment that I heard. You know, I truly believe a higher power or a God of your understanding speaks through you and around you and through other people. And that it was him showing me through other people that it matters that I stay on my path and keep being that best version of myself.
Well, and like you said earlier, like your higher power tells you you were exactly where you were supposed to be.
Right.
And how perfect was that moment. You were exactly, like, who goes to a thrift store in the middle of a convention in a big city you don't know? And you deciding to go there, and the steps that put you through to that is your higher power saying, I'm going to put you where I need you to be, and show you and this other person exactly what both of you need, right?
So like that awakening that I am exactly where I need to be, even if it feels imperfect and even if it feels uncomfortable, that I'm in this lesson, in this moment, and in this nitty-gritty of life, because, you know, it's going to, again, I'm going to use this lesson and this moment and this teaching moment, and I'm going to change it into something beautiful.
Your diary must be so big.
But seriously, when's the book coming out? Like, she's not wrong on that. I think people have already said that to you in the past, but like
somebody told me, they're like, I can't believe you don't speak at conventions. I'm like, I've never asked. Like, I have spoken at some conventions, but like far away ones. I'm like, I don't know. You guys all tell me, but when after I'm like, did that make sense?
Yeah.
Did that flow? Because I honestly, it's like higher power or God is what you want to say, what you're going to say, and what actually comes out. So, you know, those God moments, God shots, I call them, guidance over destruction, good orderly direction, you know, God. And, you know, as there's many other beliefs in the world, but I truly believe like they must have went to the same like God school and that they all practice the same morals and values and, you know, teachings to the world. And, you know, I'm not a God, like I'm not obviously not perfect, but allowing myself to be better in the world, or like, you know, being that person that can show the worst part of myself and then show the best part of myself is like, you know, there's no such thing as a lost cause. There's no such thing. And that, you know, you come into a meeting, I believe in you. I truly believe in you. And I'll hold your hand until you can hold yourself up. And I want to show you this because it is too good to keep to yourself. It is too good not to share with the world, that, you know, there's this opportunity to be the most you've ever felt, but also by giving good back to the world. And on the days that I falter and the days that I don't feel good is the moment that the world gives me good back. It's you know, it's like that scale.
Ebb and flow.
Yeah. Like life is good and it can be good, and it's not going to be good all the time, but that's where gratitude comes in.
You know, you talk about Rachel 6 years ago, and I'm like, I don't even know who that girl
She
is.
was a mess. Yeah. She was a mess.
Okay, so we're going to wrap up here shortly, but question, thinking about your time in recovery,
What's kind of like the key theme that sticks out to you? Like what's kind of
The best suggestion you can give somebody looking for recovery?
Thank you. Yes.
You're
Jeez.
welcome.
I think the best advice that I could give to anybody starting their journey or in the middle of it or in pain is be honest, ask for help, be willing to try things differently, and to know that you're never alone. And whether you put that into faith or into people, that that we're not meant to do the life alone. We're meant to do it in a group of people, a community. History shows years and years and centuries that we need each other to survive. So just keep going, lean on those people, and be honest with yourself.
She was going to write a book one day.
Yeah. You heard it here first. Yeah. Rachel, she will be famous.
Somebody said to me, can I have your autograph before you become famous? I'm like, don't worry, the kids will reap my benefits of my fame.
That's amazing.